Hi, I'm Jen Hurd, and welcome to the Thrive Through Life Change event, where we're going to learn how to regain powerful energy, create an inspiring vision, and a balanced life with everything going on around us today. And I'm a professional organizer. To give you some background, I have been for 30 years, and I decided to create this event because over the years, I've had a lot of clients come to me in states of change. And some of them move through those changes really smoothly and other ones not so much. So the whole thought behind this was to find experts from around the world that can teach about going through changes in life and the best way to navigate change, maybe talk about some of the changes of their own that they've encountered and what they've learned, so that all of us can come out the other side of whatever change we're encountering, thriving and having a new vision for our life. So without further ado, I want to welcome my guest today, Tracey Grove. And Tracey is an internationally recognized resilience expert. This is her area, her wheelhouse. And she's an author and a speaker, an executive coach, and she guides individuals in organizations as well to achieve optimal resilience. So we're going to talk about that today and dig in on that. And she uses a combination of mindfulness practices and scientific knowledge as well to back them up. And that empowers people to discover their capacity to thrive in the face of adversity. So she has a book called Taming the Cyber-Tooth, which she'll talk about some of the concepts from that book today as well. So Tracey, welcome.
Thank you so much, Jen. Great to be here.
Yeah, great to have you. So, wow, this is a crazy time for many, many people. Everybody's really in that state of disruption from the routine, and change is almost like a constant now, right? There's not just a day that doesn't go by that there's not something coming at you. So with all that going on, I guess I wanted to jump in on that concept of the resilience and resilience muscle that you talk about, because I think that is something that people should understand, and this will really bolster them a little bit. So can you talk a little bit about resilience?
Sure. So the concept behind this is that it is like a muscle. It's not that some people are born more resilient than others or have a mindset that's more naturally resilient. But really, it's about thinking of it as something that you can build with practice. So just like we have to exercise our muscles, we have to exercise our minds. You know, it's the concept is almost if you don't use it, you lose it type of thing. Resilience is the same. So it's practice, and it's about training our minds to be more resilient and to train our mindsets to be more optimistic as well. So by doing this, people can actually build their resilience muscle regardless of the circumstances that they're dealing with. I also talk a little bit about this in the book. The concept is really that we can't always change our environment. We can't change the circumstances that we're in necessarily. The times that we're in right now is a very strong indicator of that, right? It's a really
Yes.
time. And a lot of it is outside of our control, and we feel kind of powerless and we feel a little bit helpless. But despite that, we can build resilience so that our own response to that environment becomes a choice and not just a reaction. And so that's the concept behind this notion of building the muscle.
And there's some factors to that as you're going along and as you're building that up. And I know when we spoke on the phone, we talked about distractions and how to handle that and how to filter. Because I think right now, especially with the media, it is very difficult to filter things out. You're just getting burned. Yeah. So what do we do? Help.
Well, first thing I'd say is turn off social media. That's a start. Yeah. Just give yourself some distance from it. So the idea behind controlling your energy and controlling distractions is not so much that you're going to get rid of all distractions. That's not possible. The world is full of noise. It's full of distraction. But the idea here is to control your distractions and choose the distractions that you want to be distracted by. So where do you spend your time? So it's really, there are two areas that I like to look at with my clients here. One is multitasking, which is just the death knell of your brain. It's terrible for your brain. It actually lowers your IQ by about 10 points. So we get dumber the more we multitask. So it's about single tasking, it's focusing. And so when we've got so much to do, we've got so much going on, so much information coming at us, it's hard sometimes to see the wood for the trees. So the idea is to give yourself an opportunity to get focused on one single thing, even if it's just for 15 minutes at a time. And you'll find that that makes your brain much less taxed. You feel a lot less exhausted. You might actually find the task is easier, even if it's a complicated task. And I'd say if it's particularly complicated, then you also want to align with your energy cycles. So we all have natural energy cycles during the days. Like sometimes I'm great in the morning. By the afternoon, I'm like dragging. I just have no energy. I'm like, oh, I don't want to do anything. I don't want to think. So I know that in the morning, if I have something really complicated I have to do, or something I have to think through, or a problem I have to solve, I'm going to focus on doing that in the morning. And then I'm leaving the email and, heaven forbid, some of the social media and all that stuff. I'm leaving that to my lower energy cycle in the afternoons, because it's not going to take a lot of cognitive processing for me to do that. So I'm choosing the distraction, and I'm choosing when I'm focusing on that distraction. It's kind of an irony to focus on a distraction, but it really does help if you can do that.
Yeah, well, and to just choose which ones, you want to look at whatever time. I'm an owl, not a lark. So as they say, they define you, the larks are the morning people. They flit about in the morning and they're so happy.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm a slow roller, but once I'm rolling, I don't go to sleep. Like, I'm up. So I'm a definite owl, have been forever since I was birth, I guess. I don't know. I was born in the evening. Maybe that's why, born it just after dinner time.
Nice.
So, that's when I start rolling. It's just me. And so I feel like if I'm going to have a task where I have a lot of writing to do, I do all my running around and stuff during the day that's low mental energy. And if I need to focus, it's got to be dark out. It's got to be, here's me and my computer. And that's when I zone in and I can just pound it out. But, everybody's different, but you have to know yourself to know when to set your schedule and how to set your schedule.
Exactly. So you have to have an understanding of where you feel like you're in that sense of flow and you feel like you can just keep going, like you say, versus because one of the key signs of the fact that you're not in your right energy cycle is the ease of how you get distracted. So when you find yourself opening and closing those emails and going backwards and forwards and flitting from one thing to the other, what you're doing is switch tasking. You're not actually multitasking. And so the brain cannot actually multitask. It's a physical impossibility. So what happens, think of it almost like a train going down the tracks. Train's going down the tracks happily, and then suddenly you decide you want to change the tracks. The train has to stop or slow down enough to veer off the track, get onto the next track, and then speed up again. And obviously this is what's happening in your brain. Obviously a split second, it's super, super quick, but it does tax your brain. Have you ever had one of those days where you get home and you're like, oh, I got nothing done. Feel like I've got nothing done. That's because you switch tasking all day, because you tend to pick things up and put them down, pick things up and put them down. And that often means that you're not in your right energy cycle to really focus, because your brain's actually looking for distractions. It happens often when we're trying to put off something that's difficult to do, or maybe a tough conversation.
Oh yeah, we create our own resistance to completion.
We absolutely do. We absolutely do. I remember years ago, I had a task to do I hadn't done before. It was kind of like a filing type thing, and I put it off because I thought it would be so difficult and so complicated. And eventually, I forced myself into a corner and I did it. And it was the easiest thing I've ever done. I was like, oh, what took me so long?
Yeah, why? I know.
Yeah. So often it's running away from the task that causes us to look for the distraction as well. So that's also a good trigger to look for if that's happening for you.
Yeah, exactly. Like, press into whatever you're resisting the most, because that's probably what you actually need to get done.
Yeah. I think there's a saying, it says something like eat the frog or something, which is, do a tough, nasty, horrible thing first.
Yeah.
Get it out of the way. And also you'll have a sense of accomplishment that way.
Oh yeah, definitely. I try very hard to make short lists of the goals for the day that I absolutely must complete. 3 to 5 things max. But if I get those things done in my focus time, then I've accomplished something. And then if I'm switching or doing whatever, it's at least those are out of the way. But I'm very conscious of not overwhelming the list either.
Right.
Because I feel like sometimes you'll procrastinate just because the list is too long.
That's very true. And I know people who make list after list after list after list, and they never get through it. And it's such a vicious cycle. And so then you have to think about how do we break down the list into something that's manageable and be realistic about what you can and can't do. And again, it comes back to what you said, knowing your energy cycles, knowing what your output can be. Sometimes we all think we can do a lot more than we can, and it's okay not to do it if you don't have the energy to do it. I think that's one of the things that we have, especially now where people are working from home a lot of the time or remotely. There's almost this tendency to fill all the time with work because we're no longer commuting. We don't have that that transition time.
The buffer. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's now merging into one thing. And so Americans are working 3 hours longer a day than they were a few months ago. And it's much more productivity, sure, but it's very draining, and it's getting close to burnout. Because of this. And unfortunately, the virtual world is much more taxing on our brains too. All these phone calls, video calls, it takes a lot more cognitive processing and a lot more just neurological processing to see the nuances of the facial expressions and tease out, especially if you've got a group of people. What is everyone saying? How are people responding? Very different to the in-person world. And so we're dealing with a lot more taxing visual imprint on our brains as well.
And I would say that just from my experience, like because I'm the president of a statewide organization, when we have the in-person meetings, it is so much easier to run an in-person meeting with 50 people than it is to try to run a Zoom meeting with, even if there's 20 that are interacting. Well, first of all, you can't get them all on the screen. So you're sliding over, trying to get it so whoever's talking is popping up, and then you're trying to control whatever. It's just so much more work. I get off of one of those meetings and they're even shorter than the in-person meetings are, but they're way more exhausting.
And all my clients are complaining about this. They're just mentally drained by the end of the day. And frankly, physically drained because we're all sitting on our butts all day. Than we used to as well. We're not moving from meeting to meeting. And sometimes we move from the bedroom to the study. Sometimes we just
the sofa.
So it's really bad for us physically. A lot of back pain. You're getting a lot of people who are struggling with just the physical aspects of it, of sitting glued to a screen. And so again, for the distraction piece, I'd say anything where you can build in time in your day where you can separate from the screen, minimize the digital distraction as much as you can within the confines of things you have to get done. As much as you can look away from a screen, the better it is.
I think it's better for your eyesight too. I really think that my eyes have been just destroyed by so much screen time over the last few years in particular.
Yeah,
definitely. I don't know what's going to happen to this generation of kids. I feel like they're all going to be in glasses like little Mr. Magoo.
It's true. It's true.
They're 30.
And I see them walking up the road, they're all on their iPhones or their iPads. They're walking in a beautiful environment, glasses and iPads, because they never look up. Such a shame.
Yeah, and I think there's going to be a lot of calcified upper cervicals.
Yes. Tech neck, I think it's called. Yeah.
Yeah, is that what it is? Yeah, tech neck.
Yeah.
There's going to be a lot of tech neck.
Yeah, very much so. There already is.
Yeah. I just compounded by this whole situation. Oh my goodness.
Yep.
That's why our yoga, stretching, Pilates, even just getting a massage every now and again, or getting one of those little neck rollers or, little vibrating massagers at the drugstore. They sell them cheap now. Dollar store has them. But just to get those kinks out and to move the lymph around, just get things going.
Really, even just a tennis ball up against the wall.
Oh, yeah.
Anything's going to get in there and just loosen things up for you. It'll do the bottom of your feet as well. If you do the soles of your feet with a tennis ball, before you go to sleep. Oh, such a relief.
Yeah, I used to, one of the coaches that I went 2 years ago, I'd go meet with her. And because she was like a neighbor of mine too. And under her desk, it was neat. She had, it was like a stair stepper, but while she was sitting at her desk. So she would just be working out, moving her feet while she was in her chair or whatever, but it just gave her the ability to pump fluids and move things around. And she loved it. She said, I put this thing in here and it's really helped me focus. And it burns off some of that surplus energy because I'm sitting and it's amazing. Speaking of energy, I was going to move into that part about the energy conservation. So because we put a lot out in a given day. With everything going on. And part of it is just the fear aspect, trying the self-protective energy we're giving off, whether we're out in public and we're trying to make sure we're 6 feet from people, right? And then, the additional energy we're having to expend now we're making 3 meals a day because we're not, or, might carry out every now and again, but a lot of people are cooking more at home and doing, and all the planning you have to do to make sure you have all your supplies in, because you have to order things now instead of maybe going to the store.
Yes.
So a lot of people aren't even going out. That's a lot of energy.
It is.
So what are ways that people can conserve and kind of retain and hold some of that and not just spill it all out?
Mm-hmm. So a couple of things that I normally recommend is one, this is all part of nurturing your recovery from what life is throwing at you, right? So one of the things I ask people to focus on is their breath. So not all breaths are created equal. So a lot of us breathe, especially when we've got a lot on our minds, we've got a lot going on, we're sitting crunched over at a computer, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Doing our technique thing. Our internal organs are all like squished up and everything, and we can't breathe right. So we breathe very, very shallowly. And what happens when we do that is that the sympathetic nervous system is activated. Have you ever ridden a horse and breathed shallowly on a horse? You can feel the horse tense up. They get really nervous. They pick up on your energy really, really quickly. So if you slow your breathing down and you do deep belly breathing, it actually calms the horse. You don't have to do anything else. You just have to breathe. And the horse immediately starts to calm down. It's quite a remarkable phenomenon. People are no different. We pick up on this kind of energy from each other. So we're all crunched up and everything. That's the energy that we're holding on to, but we're also giving it out.
Oh, yeah.
So breathing is really, really important. And so I ask people to think about how you breathe and start start your day this way, do it multiple times during the day. Do it, when if you happen to be driving around, if you happen to be walking, you can do it anytime. Walking, sitting, standing, doesn't really matter, but it's a deep belly breathing. And it's super important because what it does is it stimulates the vagus nerve. So the vagus nerve starts right up here in your brainstem, and there's 2 of them, and they run down the sides of your spine, all the way down into your diaphragm. And the vagus nerve activates the parasympathetic nervous system. So, when we're feeling all stressed out and we've got butterflies and we've got the fight, flight, freeze type thing going on, the sweaty palms, feeling a little anxious, a little stressed, that sort of low-level anxiety that I think a lot of us are dealing with right now, that's the sympathetic nervous system, which is staying activated and staying constantly switched on. And even though it's low level, it's not like, oh my gosh, a tiger's about to jump on me kind of stress. It's constant low level stress. And the problem with that is it shortens our telomeres, which are the tiny little ends of our chromosomes. So we get older and we age and it's just really bad. So we really want to ideally live a long, healthy life and have, good skin, good bones, all that good stuff. So we want to keep the chromosomes, you want to keep the telomeres growing. And they do not grow in the presence of cortisol and stress. So you have to reduce that. So get the vagus nerve activated by deep belly breaths. This is not a chest breath, it's a belly breath. Your belly comes in and comes out. A really deep breath in and a deep breath out. And doing that multiple times a day, it calms things down. So it actually switches off the sympathetic nervous system, ratchets down the cortisol, and switches on the parasympathetic nervous system, which does great things for your digestion. If you've got stomach issues, if you're feeling anxious and you're struggling when you eat and you feel a little ill, that's your sympathetic nervous system causing you to mess up your digestion. This will get that back together again. It also then does great things for your focus. It's a great way to focus if you need to focus on those tasks and control those distractions. It's just a great way to calm things down when you're dealing with something that you need to think through. But it's also a very good way of getting your brain to solve complex tasks. So from an energy perspective, breathing is probably one of the most important things we can do. And it's one of the things that we do the least. And so I encourage my clients to, when you start your day, put your feet on the ground, start a morning ritual, do some deep belly breathing. Don't look at your phone. Don't pick anything that's going to stress you.
That'll immediately put you into the shallow breathing.
Exactly. So put yourself into that nice, and it also activates your brain into an alpha state, which is very meditative. It's, it's basically a standing or breathing or standing meditation, if you like. It's just really just being aware of your breath and just giving yourself that opportunity. You can also stimulate the vagus nerve. It's a little more shocking by putting your face into cold water. And
Oh,
so that's a good idea, but you can do it that way as well. As long as your cheeks are in cold water, that also stimulates the vagus nerve. But the energy comes from breath. Breath is where everything comes from. So that's where I would focus.
there was when I lived in Arizona, just this is a total side note, but it just came to mind when you said stimulating that. There was a group of guys that would come in the morning to Whole Foods, and there was a juice bar there, and they would have them juice the hottest peppers that they could possibly find, and they would shoot those in the morning. And that's how they got their focus on, was the hot pepper juice. I guess it was, Southwest, so that's what they were using, what they had on hand. But I don't know what that does exactly, but wow, I mean, it was a ritual every day. These guys would come in.
Yeah, believe it or not, it's actually the capsaicin that stimulates the nerve endings, and that can the burning can actually cause you to get. It's kind of like caffeine. It'll give you a jolt and give you focus, because what it's doing is it's stimulating your adrenal system. So you basically get a shot of adrenaline when you have caffeine, which is why it's good to have occasionally, but not too much, because you're basically putting your heart under a lot of stress because you're constantly feeding adrenaline into your system.
We did an experiment when I was in high school with frogs and caffeine. It was a terrible thing to do to a frog, but we would put caffeine directly on the heart muscle and watch what it did. And the hearts would go insane. Yeah. They would just go all over the place. And ever since then, I'm extremely conscious, though, that the benefit of that was learning that what caffeine can do to heart muscle. It's not the thing. I mean, it's good to get you just a little boost if you need it, but overdoing it is not good.
and don't rely on it. I had a colleague who youngster, super fit, and he was drinking a lot of caffeine, and he got heart palpitations to the point where they actually wanted to do surgery. He cut caffeine out completely, and he's fine. So different people react different ways. I know that I had a Red Bull once in my life, and I'll never do that again. I thought I was going to help.
Yeah. I can't. I couldn't, because I'm a caffeine sensitive anyway. I'm a sensitive to most things, but that in particular. So I just know for myself, a good strong cup of tea or 1 cup of coffee.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. Then there's the opposite of my family. My father can drink a pot of coffee, does nothing. Like he has.
Some people doesn't affect them as much.
Yeah, he's impervious, which blows my mind. So part of this current pandemic and what I wanted to address for the audience before we finish up was that part of regaining energy and balance, sort of like pulling in some energy then, so we've got, how to conserve and how to breathe and sort of partition a little bit, but also how to regain, like get back a little bit of the energy we may have lost with this fear and whatnot. What are some recommendations for recovering that verve that we had?
Yeah. So there's a couple of ways you can do this. There's obviously the physical side, which is things like the breathing, the watching your posture, that kind of thing. There's things like, are you moving enough? So are you getting up from your desk enough? Are you standing more than you're sitting? That they say that if you are sitting, we sit about 6 to 8 hours a day, more now, I think. And most adults are sedentary about 60% of their lives. It's shocking how bad it is for you. It actually shortens your life by up to 7 years sitting all day.
7 years.
Yeah. and it doesn't actually matter how much exercise you do. The acting is like the new smoking. It's really, really bad for you. So anything that you can do, if you can replace 2 hours of sitting with 2 hours of standing and just moving around a day, reverse a lot of that. It's incredibly powerful. It's really good because it also helps your posture. If you're feeling like you haven't got energy, also another thing to do is to think about your posture. Are you sitting up straight? Are you standing straight? Are you not crunching your internal organs? Because when you do, your mindset becomes more optimistic when you're sitting up straight. It's like that experiment where they make people put a pen in their mouth for a while, and because it's actually activating the smile muscles, it makes you start to feel happier. It's a physical impact on your brain. It's really interesting.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
The other thing that you can do, which is really good from a physical point of view, is get outside as much as you can. And I don't care what anybody says about this, stay indoors. That's absolute trash. It's so bad for you. It's really unhealthy.
Yeah.
COVID spreads indoors, not outdoors. Get outside as much as you can. Get in nature as much as you can. Because especially if you can get into sort of a forested area or under trees, what trees do is they release these incredible enzymes that called cytokines that actually take care of they're anti-inflammatory, they're antifungal, they're antibacterial. The trees bathe themselves in this stuff as a form of self-protection. And when you're walking around in a forest, it's called forest bathing. You're doing all of this. And that's why you feel so good when you're walking in a forest. The air feels fresh, it feels great. You're actually inhaling an immune system booster. So anything you can do to breathe in really, I mean, notwithstanding allergies, of course, breathe in some really good, natural air. That's fantastic. Getting your feet on the ground, getting grounded. We actually, because we're electromagnetic beings, if you get your feet on the ground, you're basically earthing yourself, believe it or not. And so you lose a lot of that anxious energy that you get. We pick up a lot from 5G and 4G signals and wireless signals. Yes. We absorb a lot of that EMP stuff. You can actually ground and release a lot of it just by walking barefoot a little bit on the ground. Get your feet on the grass or on the soil just for a few minutes a day. And it's also just good for your feet. So those are the physical things you can do. The other thing that I find is really helpful for my clients is this notion of thinking about gratitude. So focusing on a more optimistic mindset, and it's by looking out of yourself and looking at other people. So if you're grateful for people in your life, if you think about if there are 5 people you could write a note to say thank you for something that you appreciate, and then read the note to them, that's an incredible way to focus your mind on gratitude and getting out of our own ruminating committee heads, right?
Right.
The other way to do it is I often challenge my clients to say, I want you to write down 3 amazing things that happen to you every day. And often they grumble and they complain and they're like, but nothing amazing happened. And they're like, okay, well, what happened? And they're like, well, I got up and had a shower. I'm like, really? Running water, eh? And they're like, yeah. I'm like,
sounds amazing to a lot of people in this world. Yeah.
Exactly. So, and the whole concept of this is to start thinking about the ordinary as extraordinary, because then we start to notice. Because our minds are wired to look for the negative. We're always scanning for threat. Our amygdala is always running around in our brains going, what's going to threaten me? What's the problem going? Is my value being undermined? Am I being triggered in some way? People are so sensitive to any kind of threat, logical threat.
Yeah.
What this does is it helps you to think less about the threats and more about what's good in our lives. And it helps you to focus on the gratitude that for other people, but also the gratitude for all the blessings that we have. Takes you out. It actually physically builds neurological pathways in your brain to optimism. So 2 things, if you can walk outside in nature, and actually I challenge you while you're walking outside in nature, think about 3 things that you're really grateful for. One might be that you're walking out in nature, which is fine. You can do that. You're actually building these optimistic pathways in your brain, and you start to train your brain to be more optimistic, and that brings you much more positive energy than the draining energy that you have from the negative stuff that's going on around you. So that's exactly. I think we could all focus on.
Yeah, I think those gratitude exercises are amazing. I started doing them. I'm trying to think if it was that I get it from a book I read years ago, but when my daughter was little. And one of the parenting techniques they said too was to do that with your kids. And I have to say that, kids right now being so depressed and deprived of their usual activities and whatever, that's a great exercise for families to do with kids, because you want to, like, I used to end the day every day with my daughter with the gratitude list, the thank you list,
Nice. That's
and
good.
yeah, and I'll tell you what, in spite of, because like, for example, when I went through my divorce, whatever, we still did it. If it was a bad day, it was a bad day, but there was always something you could find. And
yes.
It gives you a reason to keep going. It gives you a reason to go to the next day and look for the next good thing. And I think that's huge. It's a big balance. Right?
Absolutely. And if you look back on each week and you see that list, you start to realize how much you have that's, worth noticing. It's those little things.
Oh yeah, we used to. I use this story a lot, but if we couldn't think of anything that day, we would say, "Well, there's always cake." Thank you, cake.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, I mean, it was just like you
Yeah,
had a
why not?
fallback.
Yeah.
As long as there's cake, we're good. So, you know. So, yeah, and then I wanted to just do this final thing before we go, and that was talk about the committee in our heads too, and trying to take out of that, like as we're hearing ourselves talk to ourselves, because there's the
Yes.
committee in there of all the experiences we've ever had and all the people who've ever said things to us, good, bad, and otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
How do we filter the committee a little bit? I wanted to just sneak
Mm-hmm.
that in here at the end because I think it's important for people.
Yeah, and I think the committee can get very loud during times like this, especially for people maybe worried. We're worried about family, we're worried about friends, worried about our jobs, our communities, that kind of thing, and that's the committee talking to us about you can't do anything, you're powerless, etc. But the committee also tells us that we're not great at stuff, or that we're not good enough all the time. It's that little voice of doubt. And especially for women, I think this is something that happens a lot. We tend to ruminate on things and go back and replay conversations, and and that's all the committee saying, well, you see, you didn't do that right, or you shouldn't have said that, or whatever it is, right?
Right.
So my clients and I have struggled with this for a while, but we've come to the conclusion that you can't block out the committee. Committee's there, it's always going to be there. The role of the committee is actually to protect you. That's their real role, because the committee is going to tell you not to do that, not to try that, don't take that risk.
Right.
So if you can think about the committee as, they have good intentions,
Right.
misguided, and thank the committee for when that voice comes in your head. I just thank the committee. I'm like, okay, thanks for that. Appreciate the input. But then the key is to challenge the committee with data. So let's say I've got a couple of clients right now who are looking for a new role. They're looking to move in their career. Great. But they're always very afraid to move into a role where they don't have 100% of all the job description sort of requirements.
Right.
Which is very, very, very typical.
Yeah.
And and the voice in their head is saying, no, you can't do that. You won't meet the requirements. They'll find out you're a fraud. You're not good enough. But the reality is, if they challenged it and they think about, well, what have they done in the past where they've succeeded? Is there an opportunity for them to learn? Could they learn? Maybe they just don't know all of these things yet. So the challenge is to ask whatever the committee is saying, is to ask whether it's actually true. Is it really factually true? Or is it a distortion or an exaggeration? And challenge it and ask other people. I've often asked my clients, go to somebody you trust, go to a friend, a colleague, a family member, and ask them, what do they think? I guarantee you 9 times out of 10, they'll give you the opposite to the committee. They'll say, well, sure, you haven't tried that before. Of course, but you've done so many other things that have made you completely capable of doing this. Why wouldn't you? So basically, you're matching the committee with facts and data. And then the other thing is to ask, what can you control? Is something in your control? Have you done everything you can to control something? If you have, then let it go. It's okay. Acceptance is not apathy. But if there's something more that you can do, then go do. So you've got to get super logical with that committee, because they're not super logical.
No, they're very much in the emotional a lot of the time.
Very much so.
But again, it's not a bad thing to have one. It's respectfully declining to cave into their demands.
Absolutely, yeah, and and that's where the validation comes in, because then you have another voice in the mix.
Right, yeah, and I like that aspect of asking someone, some trusted friend, what do you think about this? If I did this, can I do this? What do you think? And then if you have a really good, honest friend who'll call you on stuff, be like, well, maybe not a good idea for you. I think really, those friends are invaluable. An audience, if you have one of those, hold on to them.
Very much so. And sometimes, your greatest fan can be your biggest critic, right?
Yeah.
because they want the best for you and they want to make sure that you do succeed. And so that's also a way of thinking about the committee, is that they, you know, they're out there wanting you to succeed, really, but they're, you know, very nervous, twitchy.
Very nervous and twitchy for you. Yeah. It's like watching your child when they're on stage performing and you're like, ah. You get the butterflies for them and they're just like, what?
Yeah.
Yeah, I get it. I totally get it. So I'm gonna round this out. I want to make sure everybody knows beneath this interview, you'll see Tracey has graciously put a link to where her book is located to purchase on Amazon, or I don't know if we're using your page link or Amazon link, but there'll be a link there. It'll take you right to the book, and in the back of the book, when you purchase the book, there's a free app that you can get that goes alongside of it, and can you explain the app a little bit, how it works?
Sure. Yeah, so think of it as a companion to the book, but the idea is really to go a little bit deeper into some of these concepts. So there are, the way the book is broken out into challenge, control, and nurture, and et cetera. The app is broken out the same way, with these are very short little articles, maybe a few little reminders of some of the ideas, some of the concepts, and some questions to challenge yourself. There's an app on there that you can check your own stress levels, and you can do this multiple times to see where you're at, to see where you want to focus, and you can jump around on the app to look at different areas of communication or challenging your assumptions, that kind of thing. So the app is really a way of carrying the book with you in your pocket anytime you need it, so you can just refer to it, etc. And hopefully there's also new information coming in, because the blog feeds in there as well. So just some interesting, you know, thoughts and ideas and insights, hopefully to help to really shore up that resilience muscle.
Yeah, definitely. And it's great to have access to a community, or at least to that refreshed information, to kind of keep you going with it too. So it keeps engaging you. So please click the link and check that out. Tracey's book will be available right through the link. And then also I want to remind you to tune in, because this is a 21-day program. So make sure that you tune in every day to hear from our speakers with regard to thriving through life change, getting your successful mind, your energy, and a new and improved vision together as you pass through life change. So I want to thank Tracey for being with us today, and we're going to hop on up, but we'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you so much, Jane.
Sure thing.